Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassavant, how are you, brother?
Doing very well. You have the what is this? The neutral mug today? No rival mug.
This is the mug of the hotel. So I have no choice. I don't have my rival mug with me, unfortunately, because I am in Bethnal Green, London.
Who are you talking to when you're turning your head?
Well, I'm looking at this spacious kitchen where I got this from, which is actually quite nice. I wonder if I could even just show you this. You see, that's the kitchen space behind me. So it's really a beautiful place that we're in. Town Hall Hotel, it's called. And this is this is bigger than some apartments I lived in, when I first moved out of my parents' house. So this is a really spacious 1 bedroom, almost like a residence, like an apartment. It's a long stay. Like I'm actually washing clothes. There's a washer and dryer right there in the kitchen. There's an oven. There's a espresso maker. I mean, it's just a really cool place. I got a giant TV here where I'm watching the World Snooker Championships as well. So, I mean, this is really nice. I'm really enjoying this. Had a workout today with Mick Conlan and the team. So it's really nice. I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the fight on Friday. So.
Right. And for those tuning in, thank you again for another edition of the Calling Russ Anber podcast. And you've been traveling throughout the pandemic, not as much as you would in a traditional boxing year, of course, without the restrictions, but still, nevertheless, you've been involved in fights. It's a bit more complicated. You've been to different bubbles. I believe this is the first time you've been to England since the whole pandemic began. Maybe I'm incorrect. You'll correct me here in a second, but you were there for the Usyk-Chisora fight, I believe, correct?
Telepathy. You see, you picked up on this as I'm sending the waves over the Atlantic. You picked up on this. That's
right.
Correct.
And throughout the podcast, we'll get to a lot of the action from the previous weekend with Navarrete, with Berlanga's fights, and over the coming weekend, Derek Chisora's back in action, and you may have something interesting to tell us about Chisora and your involvement with him compared to the previous fight when you were in the Usyk's corner, of course. There's even the Mayweather Logan Paul thing we may get to a bit later. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world of boxing this weekend. It's a busy weekend for fights, and one of them, of course, is Mick Conlan. So for those who may not know, how's your involvement? How long have you started with Mick Conlan, who many see with the Olympics, of course, years ago, the controversy? That's kind of where a lot of notes, people got to see him for the first time. He's had a professional career with a lot of hype at the moment. So you're there for Conlan's fight at the featherweight division this weekend on Friday. And can you just tell us a little bit about, since your involvement of when it started for you and Mick Conlan?
Well, before I tell you that, because now it seems like I forgot. It's been long enough that I forgot how long ago it was. So I'm happy, that I'm involved with them, because they're a really, really great group of guys. And, there's some teams that you go and work for, and you just get that feeling when they see you, that you're welcome, and they're happy you're there. And they're one of them. And I have a good rapport with Jamie, with Mick, with their father, with Adam Booth. It's fun to be with them, and it's fun to be around. But actually, this fight is going to mark Conlan's debut at the junior featherweight division.
Correct. He's won down. Yeah, he was 126 for his previous bouts, but correct. Yeah, good correction.
Or super bantamweight, whichever way you guys. Now, all you guys, felt offended by the word junior. So now they call it super bantamweight.
Really? Is that why there's sometimes some people use super bantamweight? I always prefer junior, whether it's junior welterweight, junior featherweight, junior lightweight. Reason being is that now some of these title belts are called a super title, right? So you have you're the super champion of the super bantamweight division.
I forgot about that. That's right. You're the super champion.
You're in the super middleweight division. I understand that one. It's not the junior light heavyweight. Maybe would be too many words, but I don't know. There's not really a rule. Both are correct, whether it's super bantamweight or junior featherweight.
Well, all the organizations use now, because they felt that the word junior was offensive, meant it was less than, so they said, well, we shouldn't call it. We'll switch it, and you're now a super lightweight. You're not a junior. You're super featherweight, not a junior lightweight. semantics, right? Like so sensitive. Guys are punching each other in the head for a living, and you're worried about whether it's called super or junior for the same division. Like it's silliness. But anyways, I guess just from growing up when I did, you learn the weight classes as they're named. So for me, you're in the junior featherweight division, or now what they call the super bantamweight division. But 122 pounds is the division, and he's making his debut in it. And in a tough fight, and guy who can switch up southpaw to orthodox, tough fight. But I think the fight that he needs, because the next fight could potentially be a world title fight. So, and I'm if not the next one, the one after that, there's talk of also a return to Belfast this summer, which, Belfast has become one of my favorite cities on the entire planet Earth. I can't wait to go back there. So I hope that happens. And what a great thrill it would be for him to win a world title in Belfast. I think you couldn't pick a better place for a kid like that who came up through that controversy of the Olympic Games and what happened. And Adam Booth, his trainer, said one time, he said, he actually, as Roy Jones did, he changed amateur boxing forever. Right. Like AIBA was disbanded because of it. They fired judges. They sent people home because of the famous double finger to all the judges after he got robbed at the Olympics. So he single-handedly changed amateur boxing, as did Roy Jones, and the controversial decision that was rendered against him in the finals in '88, where I was there as well. And that changed boxing forever. It became human fencing after that, and they went to 5 2-minute rounds and computer scoring, and people were fighting like this all the time, just covering up, and nobody was getting any points, and you were winning fights 2-1. One guy hit, and that was it. 5 rounds of that, So he single-handedly changed the sport. So it's an honor to work with him, and I'm looking forward to Friday.
And Ireland is going to be well represented this weekend. Katie Taylor is also in action, and they're probably the two biggest boxers, Katie Taylor and Michael Conlan, that Ireland represents. The combat sports world, Conor McGregor, of course, is the biggest name to come out of Ireland. And if you saw his reception in the MMA world when he did fight in Belfast and these other places, just how loyal they are and how crazy that scene could be, depending on the pandemic situation, if Conlan does end up fighting for a title at 122 pounds. And I want to ask you about, you don't see that a lot, Russ, where a guy goes from early in his career, lower weight classes. Most of the time they go up in weight, not lower in weight. What do you think of that decision to go to 122 early in his career?
I think he might be the one guy that the pandemic might have helped for that. It gave him a chance to really work on it and bring the weight down properly. I looked at him. He looked the same. He looked great. It's a 4-pound drop for him, obviously, but at that weight, 4 pounds could be a lot. But he had a long time to do it. He didn't allow himself to balloon up to a ridiculous weight without training, then try to come down. So he brought it down, and he's been comfortable and strong in training. So the truth will tell tomorrow. On Friday. But he shook out today. Weight was good. He felt good. Of course, like I said, you've got to take off those couple of pounds, but that is the game. So he'll have time to rehydrate after the weigh-in tomorrow. Weigh-in tomorrow is at noon. No, I'm sorry, at 2 local time. So in 12 and a half hours from now. So we'll be weighing in, and then he'll get to eat and rehydrate and bulk back up. And he carries the size really well. And if the weight is good, 122, he's going to have a massive size advantage over fighters at 122.
Do you know how much weight kind of they plan on rehydrating to, or do you know? And if not, let's say we see now in boxing, there's all types of rehydrations. Typically, if a guy rehydrates to between 5 to 10 pounds, most people will say that's where he's in his proper weight class. But a lot of them now are ballooning. They rehydrate 15 pounds and more because they try to dehydrate themselves as much as possible. What's your stance on the rehydration and where the fighter weight should be? Because you see it fluctuate for different divisions. But I remember guys like Pacquiao would only rehydrate maybe 5 to 7 pounds, and others 15, 20 usually is a bad sign if you start going over that 18-pound rehydration.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to say it's a bad sign, but certainly guys like Lomachenko, Golovkin, Pacquiao, as you name, Pacquiao
Mayweather
up to a high weight class. He can't possibly gain more weight. You know what I mean? He's already fighting at 147. He probably still could fight at 140. So, he's not going to get that much more. He's not going to hydrate to 164. That's not going to happen. But I think generally, when you look at guys, whether it be the Teofimo Lopez's of the world, Terrence Crawford, some of those guys, I think it's almost become standard practice that the guys are gaining the 14, 15 pounds overnight. That seems to be the norm. Is it right? Is it wrong? I was talking about this today with Mick's father. We were talking about the weigh-ins that you could probably count on, when I've said this before, so forgive me for repeating myself, but you probably can count on one hand the number of fighters or champions in boxing today who could still be champion in that weight class if they had to weigh in on the same day. Golovkin is one I think could have fought at 60. I believe Jean Pascal in his prime and could still have fought at 175. I don't think he could have done it at 168, but he could have done it at 160, at 175. There's a handful of guys who could fight the same day, and the rest absolutely need that rehydration time, and they need that 36 hours plus to rehydrate. And I used to be so good at looking at a guy and saying, I pick his weight class. Like I was never wrong. Now it seems like I'm always off by 2 weight classes. So, oh yeah, I come down. I'm like, yeah, you're so big. Guys are so big and they're fighting at that weight class. And you can see it when you watch old films as well. Like if you look at light heavyweights in the 80s, they look like at best super middleweights today, or maybe middleweights, of what a middleweight looks like today. And when you look at somebody like Crawford looks to me the same size that Marvin Hagler used to look like, when he's in the ring on the night. So, yeah, it's a different time.
That's something we don't really factor into sometimes, the mythical matchups and when we talk about the different eras. Theoretically, many of these fighters of the previous eras were weighing in same day or much closer to the actual weight class. Like, let's say, so you try to compare welterweights from Sugar Ray Robinson against some of the welterweights of this day and age. It's almost, we try to do it. Of course, it's easier for the comparisons, but nevertheless, it wouldn't be the same because it wouldn't be
those guys. Those guys wouldn't be welterweights if they had to weigh in the same day. They wouldn't be.
Except for maybe, like you said, a few Mayweather and
handful of guys. Yeah, they wouldn't be. They'd be fighting at junior middle.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way like a guy like Antonio Margarito at the time or some of these other even same day. Forget it.
No.
Even worse in some other sports, like other combat sports, the dehydration because of the weight classes are more spread out now. There's 17 in boxing, so there's more options, and I believe in 18 if you consider the WBC's bridgeweight division that's coming into the fold. So look, there's a lot of stuff to get to for the fights this coming weekend, but a super featherweight, but super maybe meaning one of the better featherweights in the world, Emanuel Navarrete, was on display this past weekend. And a Mexican fighter who has an awkward style, that lead left uppercut, it's really just a punch that he throws from a distance that you may not teach typically, fundamentally wise, but it works for him in so many ways. Like I thought he was so impressive this past weekend, and Christopher Diaz showed heart, of course, throughout that fight. But Navarrete, if it wasn't for the language barrier, could probably be a bigger star, I would think. But clearly he establishes himself as one of the most fun, must-see guys to watch fight out of all the champions.
And such a classy guy, such a humble guy, such a grounded guy, loves what he does. I've got a lot of time for him. To me, he epitomizes what I love in a fighter. He's, to me, carries himself with that class and that confidence without being, brashy and loud. And his quality speaks for himself. And I just love watching him. Christopher Diaz, boy. I mean, we gotta tip the hat to him for the courage that he showed, because there were times in there when he could have very easily, and maybe they could have called it a night for him. Like, I'm not quite sure that you needed to put Christopher Diaz through what they put him through, especially when with 2 knockdowns and a point deduction, you're already down 5 points plus the rounds you lost. Like, this is starting to become a mathematical impossibility. And the more you're sending him out there, the more of a beating he's taking. And he would show this, he would try, he'd take some punches and then he'd fire back, and just enough to keep Navarrete honest, and Navarrete has a hell of a chin, because he got hit with some big bombs from Diaz, and they bounced off him like it was reminiscent of the way punches, when you did hit him, would bounce off Salvador Sanchez's chin. And, great chin. But I thought that it got to the point where you probably needed to give Diaz an ultimatum and say, this is your last round. You don't take him out this round, I'm stopping it. Because he took a lot of unnecessary punishment, in an effort to win. There was a lot of damage done.
Yeah, and Navarrete, to me, if he goes up to 130, because speaking of a guy, Navarrete, who would probably not make 126 with his frame and his size if it was same-day weigh-ins. But let's say he eventually moves up to 130 because there's bigger name, bigger fish.
He will.
Like, to me, he's a tough out for almost anybody with that style. There's just no way you're going to have an easy night fighting a guy with that size, that volume of punching, but also can generate power. A lot of volume punchers don't necessarily have the power that Navarrete has. And now you also explained the chin. Not great defense, but he gets hit a lot and still continues to go forward in that more traditional Mexican style. Even I know if you're not that much of a fan of the term, but really I think Navarrete at 130 against Shakur Stevenson, eventually down the road, sign me up for that fight. I think it would be a great stylistic matchup.
Yeah, he has, Navarrete. I mean, the 130 is a big step up in size for him. This is a guy that fought at 122 despite his height. I don't even know how he made that. I don't even know how he made 122. But that's something special, though. That's Navarrete moving up to 30, and I think he's going to want to do it just for his legacy and to test it. But you're right, he's a tough out, and let's see if the power carries up with the weight. That's a key thing. If the power carries up, because he's a dominant size over the guys at 122, and he's dominant in size at the guys at 126. He's not going to be that dominant in mass at 130. The guys are going to start to equal out, that strength with him. So that's going to be interesting to see. But like you said, the volume that he throws, those guys better be able to stick up, because when he gets running, when he gets into the stretch and the jockey's whipping him and he's going, you better be able to keep up.
Yeah, and on the undercard of that fight, the co-main event, Edgar Berlanga, who was winning all of his fights by first round knockout, a lot of hype by Top Rank and ESPN. He has 16 wins by knockout, all in the first round. Now he wins, but he doesn't even get a knockout. He actually goes to decision against Damon Nicholson, who deserves a lot of credit for being a solid veteran in that fight. Now, if you're Berlanga and as the prospect of a coach and a trainer, Russ, do you go out of a fight like this saying, 8 rounds and that's a good step? Or do you say to yourself, okay, maybe we need to stop in this momentum here and maybe not move him up so quickly, because the power might have worked, but it may not be as strong as we anticipated?
Well, I'll tell you what, Damon Nicholson.
Yeah.
Nicholson,
yep.
Yeah, he's a good fighter. Don't take anything away from him. He's a good fighter. Okay, he has a good amateur pedigree. He's a good fighter. He knew exactly what to do. He had all the moves. He may not be a blue chip prospect, but he definitely is knocking on the door of contender status. This guy can stay with anybody. Okay, don't think he can't. He's a really talented guy. He knows his way around a boxing ring. Berlanga had success in that fight because he's a power puncher. Very quick, too, for a power puncher. He's very quick. Reminds me a little bit of Lemieux, in that kind of explosiveness in his power. But I think you look at it and say, okay, you answered a question. My kid can go 8 rounds. And he can go 8 rounds throwing hard, and he's still throwing hard in round 8. So I think that was a good, dropping Nicholson in the 8th round was also a big sign. But I think there's things you come away with. And I've always said this, even back in the days, with Lemieux and whatnot, it takes more than just power to achieve greatness in boxing. So, I think if they learn from this, and he's got a great corner, he looks like he's got the talent, he believes in himself. But if he understands the way Canelo understood that there's more to boxing than just power, the sky could be the limit for him. It could be really the limit. He's a good fighter, good power. You add to that, oh my God, that's a complete package.
No, and it's interesting that you brought up David Lemieux, because I don't know if you remember this fight at the casino against Jason Nogler. Now, it ended up being a bit heavier. David had fought and had won all of his fights by knockout, and really was winning by devastating knockout in junior middleweight. And then when he stepped up the middleweight or some sort of catchweight with Jason Nogler at the time, and Nogler took a beating, and David went rounds. And sometimes I say, okay, it's good to have that reality check that you're not going to knock everybody, especially as you get up in the rankings of fighting better opposition. So is it almost a blessing in disguise? Okay, happens now before it gets to a point where you're really facing somebody who's going to be able to fight back a bit more than Nicholson did against Berlanga, and then it's maybe too late. I think you're right, for the 8 rounds, I don't know, but to me, it's more of a sense of, okay, this is a good reality check at the same time that I have a lot of power, but not everybody's going to fall in the first round.
I think credit here has to, sometimes these guys go a little bit as unsung in the sport of boxing, but they're very important in the development of a fighter. And I think a lot of credit for this has to be given to, Brad Goodman and Bruce Trampler, matchmakers at Top Rank, who they know the game. They know they've got to put their guy in there and see what this guy's got. It's okay that you're blasting everybody out in one round, but what happens when you don't blast them out? How do you adapt to that? And I think they found somebody, and it's not an easy task to find somebody that is going to deliver on going rounds. And there was already a victory when Nicholson got out of round 1. Oh, the streak is over, okay? So now, how deep does he go? Well, he went all the way, and I think, tip of the hat to the guy who showed a lot of heart. He got hurt, he got dropped out like 4 times in the fight, picked himself back up to hang in there and, showed tremendous heart against a murderous puncher like Berlanga, and he was standing at the end. So I think that was great for Nicholson to break that streak of Berlanga, and I think it was great for Berlanga to realize, I'm not going to get everybody out of there, and I carry this power, but I need to develop a complete overall game, because not everybody's going to go. And years ago I used to call it a puncher's disease, like they think they're going to just hit guys and it's going to be over. And no matter how much you tell them that's not the case, it's difficult for them to believe you, because every time you tell them that, they walk out there, they go boom, the other guy goes like this, and it's a wrap, so they don't believe what you say until something like this happens. And if it would have been a case of Nicholson dishing out more punishment and was a bigger puncher than he was, it could have been for a rougher night. So I hope this is a wake-up call to Berlanga.
And Top Rank, you referenced the matchmakers. If you look at throughout the last decades, Top Rank has consistently really, I think, built up fighters and prepared them for the best possible results when they get to the stage where they need to be in world championship fights. I don't know, to me, Russ, if you really look at building a fighter, whether it's facing different styles, opposition, volume of fighting, really, to me, Top Rank has by far and away been the best at developing their fighters from the early stages into making sure they're ready when prime time hits and the championship fights are there.
Well, the reason they're able to do it is because they end up signing a ton of blue chip prospects. So they've got the ponies to do it. They go after excellence. They strive for excellence. They strive to get the best guys, and they can match them that way. They're not getting the other guys where they have to be a little bit more careful. They take chances with their guys. They put them in. Are you going to hit the wall, or are you going through the wall? And that's what happened. So Berlanga, they put him through the test, and he went through the wall and passed the test. So now the key in this, like with any fighter who has to go through something like this after coming off a streak of knockouts, now how does the kid take it? Is he humble enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to knock everybody out, I need to work on other stuff? Or does he think, next time if I hit him again, if we'd have fought a 10-rounder, it depends on the mentality. Or he said, if it would have been 10, I'd have stopped him. Okay, but that's not the idea. You know what I mean? That's not why you're supposed to be doing it. So, we'll see what he learns from this, but they gave him the test.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to address something here because I heard Jake Paul this week talk about the fact that in boxing, everybody has padded records and he just wants to have a few fights, but against the best. And but here's the thing. Yes, there is padded records in boxing, of course, but if you build records correctly, what Jake Paul didn't understand and others sometimes don't understand is that you want to have fights that are developmental fights. You learn things as you go along. It's stupid to put guys right away against top opposition unless they have an amateur pedigree like a Lomachenko with over 300 amateur fights. So in the case of like Top Rank, what they're doing to Berlanga, it's smart. It's development. It's not just padded records. You must build fire up, which some people sometimes who are more maybe now don't know the intricacies of the sport.
Listen, I remember when Tyson first turned pro, and people were saying, he hasn't fought anybody. He hasn't. It doesn't matter. Just because you haven't fought anybody doesn't mean you can't fight. It has to do with, like you said, development, getting yourself used to being in the dressing room, getting used to the cameras, getting used to the TV, getting used to the media, getting used to people in the dressing room, or getting used to the walk. There's a lot of things that come into play that people don't realize. It's not just about, oh, he beat him. Oh, yeah, he could beat him. So, okay, you pick 20 guys. This is what you're saying. Let's pick 20 guys that we know he can win, he can beat. Skip over all of them and let's just go to the 21st guy who's really good. Right. That's like, it's insanity, right? It's stupid thinking. And I always believe that, I don't want to ever take a fighter into a fight hoping to answer questions. I want my questions already answered before we go into that fight.
Meaning that you want to see that in the gym.
I want to see it in the gym. I want to see the way he conducts himself. I want to see it in sparring. I want to see it. So now, of course, there are things you're going to overcome in a fight that you can't simply, do in the gym. But for the better part, what your guy can handle. So that's what I want. I want to know those answers. I'm like a lawyer. I want to know the answer before I ask the question. I know the answer.
All right. And there's going to be a lot of people want to know the answers for the results of upcoming fights this weekend. It's an action-packed weekend. We'll try to go through this in a few minutes as the fact that it's late. We don't want to be keeping you up too late, Mr. Anber, as it's
10 to 2 in the a.m.
Yeah, so it's either very late or very early, depending on your point of view. But before we get to some of those fights, and if you're interested in placing a wager on some of the action over the weekend, we, of course, have a sponsor of the show, which is, Mr. Anber?
Bet99.
Here we go. It's bet99.com. They're Canada's newest online sportsbook and casino. Be sure to check out their player props, bet builder, and their risk-free live bet bonuses. And the important stuff for, if you're a boxing fan, you want a bit of a promo deal, use the code BOXING99. You get a sports welcome offer. They'll deposit and match 100% up to $600. $100, they'll give you another $100 for your betting. So please make sure to check out bet99.com. Canada's newest online sports book and casino, and one of the main fights over the weekend that's not involving, of course, with your action in McConlan Friday night, but on Saturday, it's Andy Ruiz, his return since the loss to Anthony Joshua against Chris Arreola, and an all-out Mexican-American heavyweight showdown. Not something you see every day, of course. And in many ways, Chris Arreola was supposed to be the Andy Ruiz at one point. Many thought he would become the first Mexican heavyweight to become a world title holder. But Andy Ruiz has surpassed him. Arreola, though, an action-packed fighter. But the storyline going in, Russ, is that if Ruiz is in great shape compared to, of course, the Joshua fights, and with all of the right talk has been said, now that he's with the Reynosos and training with Canelo, he could be really a big-time factor in the heavyweight division. Do you see it this way, or do you still think Arreola, because of the power, is a big-time threat to Andy Ruiz?
Did Bet99.com tell you to stop letting Russ talk about the promo of doubling your bet? Did they tell you I'm not to say that anymore and that you had to handle that? Because that was my favorite part.
All right, well, next time we'll make sure to have you involved in it as
well. Hey, listen, Andy Ruiz can fight. Mm-hmm. That is one guy that, the saying of don't judge a book by its cover. That is one guy to have never judged by his cover. This guy has an extensive amateur background. He could fight. I remember years ago, what Mark Ramsey and I were talking about is that, hey, this kid, Andy Ruiz, he can fight. Be careful. Watch this guy. Watch this guy. And, we knew that this guy was good. But when you look at him, you don't think much of him. Joey Daweko is another one similar to that. You know, you look at Joey DeWeco can fight.
Not the level of, he didn't get to the level, of course, of Andy Ruiz, but he has the skill set that you cannot. And locally here, not many people will know this, but in Quebec, there was Brutus, who was able, beside another Brutus Tessier, who's now also working with the commission, who was able to add some skills despite the look and the weights and whatnot. So back to your point about Andy Ruiz.
Yeah, so Ruiz can fight, and and it's always said that, you know, if he would have taken it serious, he has all the skill and talent in the world to do it. And I remember specifically talking with the Smiths when we were in Madison Square Garden the night that he fought Ruiz, and we were sitting in the dressing room watching the fight, because it was much better to watch it on the big TV that they had in the dressing room than to try to reach, you know, and see far down, you know, in the Madison Square Garden to watch it. And so we were watching it, and I said, you know, from the very beginning, I said, before the fight, I said, this fight worried me because I felt that the replacement opponent, being Ruiz, was a better fighter than the originally scheduled opponent, which was
the fighter who, of course, tested positive there. I'm drawing a blank as well. But we'll get Jarrell Miller.
Jarrell Miller, that's right. You know, and you know, Miller comes from a kickboxing background. He was a bigger guy, slower. You know, Ruiz has been a boxer his entire life. Don't let the looks fool you. He can fight. He can fight, and he proved that night that he can fight. And then he also proved how, you know, not serious he can take his career. And now, hopefully, with the Reynosos, he's going to show what he can. And if he does take it seriously, I think he has all the skills in the world to show just how good he is against Arreola. Arreola's a tough guy. I was with Deontay Wilder when he fought him. You know, a tough kid, has a lot of heart, but Ruiz to me is special.
I think there's no way this fight doesn't end up being a war at one point, because both men, despite their looks and their weight, are able to throw combination. Especially Andy Ruiz, he's so fluid for a guy.
Andy, for sure.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Andy Ruiz is somebody else that Top Rank at one point kind of brought through the ranks. But anyways, he's with PBC now, but just to show kind of sometimes the development of certain fighters. And Andy Ruiz, when you look at the heavyweight division, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, looks like there's trouble in paradise based on everything you read this week. Who knows if that's going to happen? Of course, in boxing, it's always complicated when it's the two best fighters facing against each other. But even if they do fight each other, really, Deontay Wilder looks like he's going to be coming back one of these days. But Ruiz is in prime position to be a major factor because, yes, he lost to Joshua in the rematch, but wasn't never really hurt. He was just completely outboxed and wasn't in any shape to mount an offensive attack. But if he wins against Arreola, which many expect Saturday, he's right back in the thick of things and could fight at Tyson Fury, could fight at Deontay Wilder, could fight at the winner of Joseph Parker and Derek Chisora. Like, he's in there. And I think he has a potential of kind of redeem himself of, he was a Cinderella story when he won by knockout. Then it got to his head a little bit, went into some bad habits, and everybody likes a redemption story. Like, I think Ruiz is somebody that could be a big time factor depending on the result Saturday.
And just because he lost doesn't mean he can't fight.
No. And it's something in boxing sometimes we're too hard on compared to MMA, right? MMA, the guy loses, he's back into the main event next week, no problem. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but boxing has kind of sometimes this, because you've lost, you're a bum, which is completely not the case. Especially if you're willing to fight great fighters, you're going to eventually lose.
Of course, and you know, I think everyone is ready to admit as well that, you know, Joshua prepared for the rematch, got ready, did what he had to do 100%. Can't take anything away from him. And Ruiz did it. So when one guy really prepares and another guy doesn't, well, it makes the gap becomes even wider. And he did not prepare for that fight. He was not ready the way he was ready for the first fight. He put much more intensity and hard work and effort into the first fight than he did in the second one. But that doesn't take away that he can't fight. And he can, and he will be a factor in the heavyweight division. Is he a little bit undersized in height? Yeah, he is, but he has the talent to go a long way. And as for Joshua and Fury, you know, this is going to get done. I cannot see, like, it baffles me that there's just no way that the biggest fight in boxing history, in terms of money, the biggest fight in boxing history from a financial perspective is not going to happen.
Well, wait. Mayweather Pacquiao, they're not going to beat Mayweather Pacquiao. It might
You don't
come
think
close.
so?
No, I
You
don't
don't
think
think
so.
so?
I mean, obviously, well, maybe worldwide, but I have my doubts in this day and age with everything that's going on that they'll be able to beat Mayweather Pacquiao or Mayweather McGregor. But they'll come close when it comes to actually the biggest heavyweight fights of all time. But
Okay, maybe heavyweight.
Mayweather
Okay,
Pacquiao
but
is a perfect example. It happened years and years later than it should have happened. So why can you say it's impossible that it happens? This happens all the time in boxing where guys don't face off against each other at the right time where it would be the biggest fight.
because it's the heavyweight division. There's something like this doesn't happen all the time, that we're looking at the possibility of a unified, undisputed heavyweight champion. I mean, there's a certain thing. This has to be made. I think it has to be made. They eventually made Pacquiao Mayweather. Yes. Don't quantify McGregor and Mayweather as a fight. I'm sorry.
It was more of an event than a fight.
Correct. So, so if it's not the biggest in boxing, it's going to come close. And it's certainly going to be, like I said, in terms of dollars, it's going to be the biggest in the heavyweight division. And already what they're talking about in the site fee is crazy. So, I think it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, it's almost criminal that if it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. And in London,
they should strip both guys if the fight doesn't happen.
Blame everyone, huh? We'll have to wait and see. Fury's blaming Eddie Hearn and Eddie Hearn, and they're blaming delays on a bunch of issues that are out of their control. We'll monitor the situation, and we look forward to being able to talk about it if it is indeed finalized. And you're in London on Friday. On Saturday in Manchester, a massive card where Dimitri Bivol returns and defends his title. You have Chris Eubank fighting. You have Katie Taylor, like we previously mentioned, against Jonas. And now you have Chisora against Parker, another heavyweight matchup. And the heavyweight division has been exciting for the last few years, more so, of course, than it had been the previous 10, probably. And Chisora, credit to him, loses against Usyk, fought well in the early stages of that fight. And now he's in a position, again, to be spoiler, if you will, against Joseph Parker, who's a tough out, very good jab, but maybe kind of has slowed down the momentum over the years. At one point, people thought he would be the next big champion. The winner is right there in prime for a big fight. Can you tell me a bit about what's going on with Chisora now and you? Because you met him after, of course. We saw some of the footage in the locker room after the Usyk fight, but you guys exchanging, you were talking and having a bite to eat in the dressing room. What's your involvement with Chisora and your thoughts on this fight here Saturday night against Parker?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised last week to get a call from Buddy McGirt, who's training Chisora, and asked me if I was in town. And I told him I would be here in London on Friday. And he offered me the opportunity to come in and wrap Chisora and work the corner and do cuts. And I guess Chisora knew and remembered me from, having worked with Usyk. So he seemed to be open to that. So of course I said yes, because I always going to say yes if Buddy asks me to do something. Roy Jones is going to be up there as well. Roy Jones is already up in Manchester. He's working with Eubank. So I spoke to him yesterday, as a matter of fact. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. I'm looking forward to seeing Katie Taylor as well and see her. I haven't seen her in a while. So, it's going to be a hell of a card. And I'm sorry I'm not there for fight week. Looks like they're having a great fight week up there. But, I'm happy to be here in London with Mick. And they asked, we knew about this one was first, and this was my first obligation. And had it been on the same night, I'd still be here with Mick. But I'm proud to be working again with Buddy. And I know we're going to go into this fight as an underdog with Chisora. Parker's a good fighter, but I think it's a style matchup that's always attractive. The boxer against the puncher, the boxer against the guy who's coming forward. And hopefully Buddy has put in his magic touch on this, because Buddy can make a difference. Like, I've seen the difference Buddy's made in various fighters, including Arturo Gatti and so on. Like, you see the difference. He makes a difference in the corner. So I hope he's made a difference with Chisora. And I leave here right after the fight. Like, the fight's Friday, and then Saturday up there, and then right into the dressing room. So
not bad, huh? You're going to be in London with the Conlan fight, of course, and then you're going to be able to see Roy Jones and Buddy. No shortage of, I think, discussions, right? That is going to be available, you, Buddy, and Roy in the same place.
That's right. That's right. So I'm looking forward to that. And, friends that I haven't seen in a long time, It's going to be fun to go up there. Joe Gallagher, I'm going to see Joe up there. So, it's going to be fun to see everybody up there, and then bang, off to Moscow. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a hell of a run.
Just quickly, for the people who may not know, why are you going to Moscow for?
It's just a couple of day layover before I go to Ekaterinburg to work with Liam Smith, who fights the following Friday in Ekaterinburg. So
Beefy Smith.
Sure.
Maybe the final thing I want to just address, or maybe you can skip this if you don't want to talk about it, but we officially have the announcement that Mayweather and Logan Paul are fighting this exhibition in Miami, June 6th. My only question regarding this, because this is even a bigger joke than anything Jake Paul to me has done, because Logan Paul does not have a single win in his professional career in boxing, has less skills than Jake Paul. He's no skills at all. He's athletic, he's big, but he's terrible. And Mayweather, I want to ask you this question. Do you think it hurts his boxing legacy any way, shape, or form? Because he's taking the McGregor thing was one because it was an MMA champion, UFC champion, who was considered the best striker. That's one thing. But then since he fought the kickboxer in Japan, Nasawaka, I think, pardon me if I don't have the correct name, but he knocked this guy out in one round that looked kind of like a circus show in Japan a few years ago. Now he's coming back to fight the YouTuber Logan Paul and make a boatload of money. Does it hurt his legacy at all in boxing, or do you think it doesn't matter?
No, I don't think it matters. The only way it would matter is if Logan Paul knocked him on his ass, or knocked him out, an act of God happened. But yeah. I'm very torn on this. I'm very torn on this that, when you just said he could make a boatload of money, and I'm thinking to myself, how and why? How could that be the plan to financial richness and making a profit, a massive profit, fighting Logan Paul? Like, I just, you're going to present this as an exhibition. So does the guy have to have a license if it's an exhibition? Does the commission get to do that? Do they oversee this? If so, how can you call yourself a commission if you're giving a license to a guy to fight who's 0-1 to fight Floyd Mayweather?
And bash the commission if we don't even know if they're giving them the license or not.
I'm just saying, if that's what it is, if you're not giving them a license, then that means it's not in your jurisdiction. There's so many. It's scary in the sense of what this could be. And I think about the knockout loss that Nate Robinson suffered against Jake Paul.
Yeah.
And the fact, Jake, although, with no boxing background, boxed, like he trained, he was training with BJ Flores. He was a real legitimate, up and starter, he's a startup guy. He could fight a little bit. How you turned around and were able to give a license to Nate Robinson. And what if that knockout would have been
on the Nate Robinson knockout? How do we get to this?
Well, my point was, like, could this be something that becomes dangerous? And if something does happen in amateur boxing, I don't know if you read recently, a fighter just passed away at the World Junior Championships.
A 19-year-old fighter, yeah.
19 years old. And he's a fighter, so it just worries me that when you're seeing this kind of thing, at what point, okay, it's not likely to happen with Mayweather and Paul, okay, fine. But anything could happen at any time. And you just wonder how dangerous giving these license out to people, is who have not boxed, don't know how to throw a punch, don't know how to defend themselves, didn't have an amateur bout, didn't have an amateur training, weren't viewed and have to pass a test to say, are you good enough? Can you handle it? If you would have tested somebody like Nate Robinson, he would not have passed the test to become a professional fighter. So that kind of stuff is what bothers me. How does this generate money? I'm trying to wrap my head around, how does this make money? All these people, it can't be Mayweather's fans want to see him fight this guy, and all these other people are going to want to go and see Logan Paul fight Floyd Mayweather. Like, that's not even a fair match. If any matchmaker in the world tried to submit a matchup of a guy who had, forget 50 wins, who had 50 fights against a guy who was 0-1, they would say no. Right. They would say no. They would reject the match.
Boxing's equivalent to WWE, and this has a shelf life. It's not going to be on forever because at one point the novelty of seeing this is going to end. But what's happened is that people fall into the talk. And Logan Paul is going to talk a great game. And that means people are going to buy to either see Logan Paul get drilled to smithereens, or his loyalists of YouTubers are going to tune in to see he's the big guy who it just takes one punch. It takes one punch. That famous phrase. People don't understand the subtleties of boxing. They have no clue. They think because it's fighting and they've seen it since they were kids in the backyard school that anybody can do it, and they have an opinion on everything. You ask somebody, what's your opinion on cricket? What's your opinion on soccer? If they don't follow the sport, they're going to say, you know what, I don't know. Boxing, this guy against this guy, they all have an opinion because they all think it's easy. It's street fighting, but a bit more advanced. They don't understand that a guy like Mayweather is going to see the punches coming from Logan Paul like he's Neo from the Matrix. It's going to be easy. Like it's not even close. Even if he doesn't even train much, even if he's way over the hill, Floyd, at this stage of his career, I just think it's unfortunate that this is going to get so much attention. But the good news is that Jean Pascal and Badou Jack, two people we have a lot of respect for, are going to be fighting on the co-main event, and that's a legitimate fight in their rematch.
Of course, that's a legitimate fight to me. I hope they don't get that fight. To me, while it's okay to say they're fighting, and maybe because now they can afford, because of this, they can afford to pay Jean Badou a lot of money that they deserve for this type of fight. I hope it doesn't get buried, on the undercard, that no one pays any kind of attention to it because all the focus is on Logan Paul and Mayweather.
No, so Saturday night you're gonna have Teofimo Lopez against Cambosis, and maybe some other exhibition stuff going on the Thriller show. And then Sunday on Showtime pay-per-view, Mayweather returns for an exhibition against.
Anyways, we'll have plenty of time to talk about this as we get closer to the date.
Okay, so final thoughts. Well, besides that, you want to get back to your snooker television watching, television viewing. Any final thoughts on this evening's podcast, Russ, as you enter the early stages of the morning? You're about to see the sunrise, I believe, in London.
Listen, I'm really happy to be here. I'm looking forward to the weigh-in tomorrow. I'm excited about this, and it's always a pleasure to be with these guys. And then I'm looking forward to heading up to Manchester. It's fun being here with the Conlans, and it's going to be fun to be in Manchester, albeit for one night. I don't know how I'm going to end up saying hello to everybody I want to say hello to that I haven't seen in over a year in Manchester, because Manchester is a city where I've spent a lot of time in, and I love Manchester. So I'm looking forward.
Right? Was Ricky Hatton the best fighter to ever emerge from Manchester?
Might be. There's been a lot of good fighters come from Manchester, but certainly the most famous.
That's right.
Certainly one of the most famous. But there's been a lot of. It's a great fight city. But I'm just saying, like friends, that I get to see. It's going to be fun to see them again and say hello. And I hope I get to do that early enough. And I'm looking forward to it. So good weekend of catching up with people and trying to return to some kind of semblance of normality after a year. Like I said earlier, this whole pandemic for me started in New York with the Conlan fight. So maybe we've come full circle over a year later, 13 months and a couple of weeks, to be back with Conlan again. So it was 13 months ago that I saw him last and said goodbye. And we didn't think that it was going to be goodbye for 13 months. So I'm glad to be back, and hopefully this is the end of it. And here's my green bracelet, which says I'm negative.
I don't know how many times you've been tested. It's up there, but look, it's great that you're there for some of these big fights. All the best for us over the weekend. We'll be able to reconvene next week and enjoy the fish and chips while you're there. And we'll be talking, enjoy the snooker, enjoy the fights. And thank you everyone again for tuning in, and be sure to tell a friend if you like. And it's another edition of Calling Russ Anber. Good evening, Mr. Anber.
See you, buddy.